When we think about this weekend, Eagle Council, one of Phyllis's favorite things about it is the upcoming award for the Fulltime Homemaker of the Year. And the last few years, it's been really interesting and fun to hear Phyllis talk about it and talk about the award and then decide who should get the award. And this year, Phyllis was really pleased. She was so impressed with Dr. Carson's run for president and what he did, and so impressed with Mrs. Carson and their family, and she just was thrilled. And I think it might be one of the few things as she looks down at us from heaven that she would wish she was here to be a part of, because she really loves this award. And you'll see over here is a beautiful print, an inscription. This is what the Full-Time Homemaker of the Year award looks like. And we have one in the office at the Education Center when you go right in the door and go to the side towards Phyllis's office. And if you get a chance to come up and look at it, yeah, I hope you will. But this is a very important award to Phyllis, one that means a great deal to her because of what she accomplished. Many of you heard we did radio interviews after Phyllis died, launching our book and all. And one of the things I would tell people is Phyllis once said in an interview, which I heard her repeat, she said, "I had it all, just not all at once." She'd been a great student before she was married, then she was a wife, and then a mother and an author. And by the way, she's also a painter. There's a painting in our office, extraordinary color, watercolor painting that is on the wall, and it's Gwen and I see it in our office, right by my office, and it's signed Phyllis Stewart. And about a year and a half ago, Gwen, I guess it was we discovered it was behind a door in the other room. When you opened the door, you didn't see it, and we hung it in a more prominent place. And we asked Phyllis to remember when she painted it, and she couldn't remember exactly what year it was, but she remembered sort of the time period. But it's actually extraordinarily good watercolor. It's really impressive. So Phyllis had it all, just not all at once. But one of the things that she loved to highlight was full-time homemakers. And without further ado, to introduce our full-time homemaker of the year, I would like to introduce a small-town physician from Baltimore, Dr. Ben Carson. Dr. Carson? Coming this way? Coming up that way? You can run up stages, so I figured that's what we did.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Well, we're thrilled to be back in Missouri and in St. Louis. And, particularly I am pleased to be here to introduce my wife. You know, it's interesting how she became my wife. I guess that's interesting for everybody, how they ended up getting married. But you know, when I was a senior at Yale, I decided that it was time to stop resisting relationships. So I said, Lord, the very next relationship, please make sure it's the right one. And here we are, 41 years later, married, you know, working on our time. But, you know, Candy is a very unusual person. We were both from Detroit, by the way, but we had to go to New Haven to meet each other. But she was a musician. And I had gotten interested in music. I played in a band, was offered a scholarship to Interlochen. I was just very interested in music. And I happened to know that she was a musician, and so it was because of that relationship she ended up coming to my church in New Haven, joining the choir, and that was the beginning of us getting to know each other, and eventually it all worked out. It was actually, we were doing some recruiting for Yale because they would pay our way back home for Thanksgiving. And we didn't have money, so it sounded like a pretty good deal. And we had stayed up a little late, and we were trying to drive back to New Haven. We were going to drive all night. And fell asleep. We both fell asleep going 90 miles an hour on Interstate 80. I was awakened by the vibration of the car as it was going off the road. And, whipped the wheel. The car just started spinning like a spinning top. And they say your life passes before your eyes just before you die. It's true. It was like there was this movie reel, and I said, this is it. The car stopped in the right direction, in the lane, next to the shoulder, in time to pull off as an 18-wheeler came barreling through. Of course, by that time, Candy was awake too. and we discussed what was going on, and we both concluded that God had spared our lives for a reason, and that there was something He wanted us to do. And that was the night we started going together. It was the 28th of November, 1972. And we celebrate the 28th of each month since that time. It's called our month anniversary. But it has been an incredible adventure. And one of the things that has been just truly wonderful for me, I had an amazing medical career. And, when I look back on it, I know that it wasn't me, it was God who did all these amazing things. But the other thing that was very helpful to me was having a wife who you could always depend on. Somebody who's always in your corner, no matter what's going on. I tell you, it makes an incredible difference, particularly after you've had a lot of stress at work, to be able to come home and not have to deal with that. And then, the way that she was able to take care of our 3 sons. A lot of women these days, they say, no, that's beneath me. I don't want to do that. She had a Yale degree. She had a master's degree in business from Hopkins. And but I got to tell you, taking care of 3 young boys growing up, that is business. And, you got to know what you're doing, let me tell you. And, she can look at that as a great accomplishment. They all got married in 2011. And, and we have 3 grandchildren now. And, one's an engineer, one's an entrepreneur, and one is an accountant, and they all have wonderful wives. And I think it's because they watched their mother. And they said, I want somebody like that. Somebody who is someone that you can depend on, who's always going to take care of business. And we have a scholarship program, the Carson Scholars Fund, which is now active in all 50 states. We have reading rooms throughout the country. I think we have 8 of them right here in the St. Louis area. And as we were putting that together, now we have an executive director and all kinds of people all over the place. But to start that program, Candy and I talked about it. She had to do that while she was raising the boys. She was the one who had to put together all the documents, talk to the lawyers, talk to the school officials, and virtually all the things that dozens of people are doing today, she did, while she was taking care of the household. So I think Phyllis Schlafly made a very good choice when she really looked back and but perhaps the most important thing is that she's a woman of God and understands where true power lies, what is truly important. And I must say she was not particularly enthusiastic about my decision to run for president. And that's putting it mildly. That is until we had the grandchildren. And then she looked in their innocent little eyes. And she said, we can't let what's happening just happen and sit here idly. And we got to get involved. And she became a dynamic campaigner. Not only with me, but independently all over the country, and had a tremendous impact, and it was very helpful. So with that, I want to introduce the most wonderful woman. Let me tell you, I got to tell you one more thing. I got to tell you how wonderful she is. I love to play pool, and I'm pretty good, actually, if I do say so myself. She didn't know how to play pool when we got married, and she learned how to play just so that she could have quality time with me. And she's actually, she won't tell you this, but she's very, very good now. So, Pool Shark Candy Carson.
I tell you, I didn't pay him. I know it seems like I did. But you see people that get an award and they say, you really don't, I don't see why you're honoring me. And to tell you the truth, because, we're all human. We all make mistakes, and I've made my share on the campaign trail and before and after. But I would really like to take this moment to thank Phyllis again. This woman, when she was in her 20s, she could have said, why me? And she could have said, just put it off a little bit, but she dug right in there. And she led the charge for Christian values, for family. And, we wouldn't be where we are today. I mean, in a good way, okay? For those of us who were still concerned about our country. We wouldn't be here if it weren't for her. So can we have a standing ovation, please, for Phyllis? Yeah, I'm just sorry I didn't get a chance to see her one more time. But it was great. Thank you for showing the clip there. And I have to say, as a musician, I really appreciate that young pastor. Where is he? Yeah, okay. Yeah, when I was, believe it or not, when the kids were old enough, I got to sing Elijah with a choral group. And when you sang that prayer, man, I was with you. I was going right along. So thank you so much. Really appreciated that prayer from Middleton's Elijah. Now to get back to Ben's introduction, when he was talking about the our little accident or almost accident, we have two different versions, and he was saying that I was supposed to keep him awake, and we were actually, we were tired because, again, like he said, we spent the last night an hour in the wrong direction at University of Michigan because he had a friend there, and my sister was there, and of course we stayed up late talking with our friends and family and trying to get back at 90 miles an hour so the school wouldn't have to pay an extra day for the car rental going 90 miles an hour. So we both fell asleep, and we both woke up at the same time. I'll rest my case there. Okay. So, yes, and he was also correct in saying that I was not on board at the beginning of this when he was campaigning, because I had given him up to medicine for over 30 years, and I was so happy to be able to have a husband. It was nice that you can go out to dinner or do something that's not connected with the hospital, and so it was just so cool to have him for a little bit. And then he started getting the the signatures. When the petitions, the signatures on the petitions got to over 500,000, then he says maybe he should listen. I said, no, you don't have to, but he was going to listen. So we, he started campaigning, and again, at first I wasn't all that on board, but one of our, like he said, our kids had kids. And when you look in those innocent faces, how can you allow this to happen? Because this is probably the most critical election in the history of our nation, ever. When George Washington was around, he was popular. I mean, of course he's going to be the president. I mean, he didn't think he was worthy, but very wise man, some wonderful stories, and a lot of them you can read in our books. I'm not trying to sell them. Go get them in the library. But in a lot of the history books, like the one about where George Washington, it's a little book pamphlet, and it doesn't take any time to read, but called Bulletproof Washington, where in the French and Indian War, he was a courier for the British troops. And even though Benjamin Franklin and he and others had counseled the Brits not to do the war in their usual way, the Brits wouldn't listen. They're saying, oh, you guys in your homespun clothes and so on and so forth. What do you know about military expertise and da-da-da-da? But they were trying to warn them that the Indians would ambush from behind trees, so those little red jackets weren't going to scare anybody away. But they did it anyway, and every other courier that was going from, because of course the Brits were at the back, behind the scenes, and I mean the generals, and they sent their men out, whereas of course Washington was always with his men, to show you how Americans are different from that point of view as well. But those couriers, every single one of them got shot and died. Washington had 4 bullet holes in his jacket, no flesh wounds. He had several horses shot out from under him. And years later, there was an Indian chief who wanted to meet Washington, and he was back in the areas near Pittsburgh, Fort Duquesne area. And he said, "Sir," this Indian chief to Washington, "I was with you in that war. I was there, and I'm an excellent marksman. I had several clear shots at you. Nothing was making a difference. My braves were good shots. Nothing was making a difference. After a while, he told his braves to stop shooting, because here is a man who is protected by the Great Spirit, and he will be the leader of a great country." With that kind of a history where God has had his hand on our country, and as far as I know, we're the only country that's one nation under God, do we need to take heed to 2 Corinthians 7:14? If my people who are called by my name shall humble themselves and pray, seek my face, turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear all the way from heaven, forgive their sins, and heal their land. Our land is sick, and that's one of the reasons why he ran. Now, it didn't come out as we thought it might. We weren't sure how far God was going to take us on this, because once I started speaking, and I could point out things that he wouldn't, because he's humble. Back in those days, he was at the top, believe it. I don't know if you guys remember. He was at the top, and even when we were in Iowa, and scuttlebutt was, well, everybody's, frontline people are knocking on doors, they're making the calls. We're hearing that he was going to do well, because they'd ask someone, who are you voting for? And they said, well, I was going to vote for this one, but I heard Carson recently, so I want to vote for him. So he got calls that morning on the day of the election from Trump, from, I'm trying to remember who else. There was a couple of them, 3 or 4 of them that called and congratulated him, because they heard he was going to do well. But then there was that political strategy, we want to call it, where they start a rumor, and they release it at just the right time. So in the 1,500 precincts, the way it's set up, and it was really cool to go around, and I am going to cut this. Let me see here, because they told me I only had here. Okay, because I can tell you stories, but I won't. If you want to hear more later, yeah. They start at 7 o'clock, and each of the 15 precincts has a surrogate for each of the candidates. And you can see how in the beginning it was a great way to do things because these were your neighbors. These were people that you trusted to hear candidates. So each surrogate had 3 minutes to talk, and they did in alphabetical order. Well, they started at 7 o'clock. And shortly after 7, the cruise people who were on the front lines got this information that Carson's dropping out, a vote for him is wasted, and what was the last one? Carson says all of his support should go to Cruz. So Cruz came after Carson, so it sounded like it was the newest thing. So anyway, when I was with a staffer and we went into, I'd already spoken at a couple of places and he was speaking at other places, and we were passing the school with a lot of cars. So she said, "You want to stop?" I said, "Sure." So we went in and someone was up. So she checked for me to see if it would be okay, because they'd have to vote since our person had already been up there. Well, as I was waiting outside, this woman comes out. She says, "Candy, Carson, they said your husband's dropping out. Is that true? And if it's not, you got to get in there and tell them." That's what I did. And I told them, why we were running, because, God opened a lot of doors. I mean, because when he was thinking about it and he prayed about it, he said, "God, you're going to have to show me that this is what you really want me to do." And he did in a lot of different ways. I mean, the money kept coming in. We had a lot of support in a short amount of time, grassroots. And most of our donations were $50 or less. I mean, it was amazing. So we saw that, it looked like God wanted us to do that. Well, back then, the media, the only business protected by our Constitution, because they're supposed to be friends of the people, right? And our system of government, according to our founding fathers, it's really only appropriate for a well-informed and well-educated populace, which, sadly to say, we don't have that now. It used to be when you watched the news, you knew that was fact. When I was growing up, it's on the news, so it's fact. Now it's not. It is so sad that we've gotten to this point where you have to look at several different media outlets and then, maybe a few more just to make sure that you're getting what's really out there. They've learned how to try to boost ratings by printing total untruths about people they don't like. It's like they have their own agenda. So it's important for us now to make sure that those within our sphere of influence know what's going on. For decades, the political class has kicked the can down the road. There's almost no road left now. If we put somebody in there that's with the political class, we're going to go off the cliff. The it's 19 trillion dollars, almost 20 now. You can say it, it kind of rolls off your tongue. It's like music, kind of thing. But if you were to try to pay off even 18 trillion at a rate of 10 million a day, 10 million a day, it would take you 5,000 years. That's how bad it is. We don't realize it. Our media, you want to strangle them. Anyway, but we've got a job to do because we've got to get that word out. You've seen Jesse Waters' World. When they were asking on Columbus Day, they were saying, what were the 3 ships? One of them said La Niña, La Pinta, La Quinta. Right. So we really have, because they've been dumbing down our system and, they're, indoctrinating, and they're not putting the word out like it should be. Right now, there's only one candidate that can get us out of this mess, because we're in a crisis in so many different ways. The grid. There's so many hackers out there that if they wanted to push that button, then we would be back with no electricity anywhere. Can you imagine? No lights, no nothing. And all of our systems are down, governments, everything. Okay? ISIS, I don't have to talk about that, and our borders, and how, oh gosh, there's just so much. You've got one candidate who's trying to kick God out. The other one's trying to preserve our freedoms, including religious liberty, including the right to life. There's just so... We cannot have someone in the political class, and notice the trajectory. Hillary, up until this point, every time she gets up, it's like, like they were saying about Ted, open your mouth, it's a lie. I don't know how true that is 100%, but it's probably close to 90. With Trump, have you noticed what he's been doing lately? He's talking policy. Yes? 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 I heard it. Okay. And he's doing it in a more humble way. He's a person that knows the bottom line. He's going to do something about that because Thomas Jefferson said, it's morally wrong to steal from future generations, and that's what we're doing. Now, I was talking to you about the 19 trillion. Did you realize with our fiscal gap, and a lot of people don't hear about that because they won't talk about it. Fiscal gap is when you compare, what do you call it, unfunded liabilities with incoming revenue sources with our government, federal government. Now, if we're fiscally responsible, it should be about even. However, over the last few decades, the political class kicking the can down the road has put it way up there, $211 trillion. This is serious. We really need to get our people out this time, okay? Now the good side, because listening to him all the time, man, I learned a lot of good stuff. So then I could go on the road and I could talk about stuff. Well, let me just, I'm almost done. I give Janet some time, I'm sorry. And really sweet lady, I'm looking forward to hearing you. Okay, we have 150 trillion in assets. The federal government has this. Parks, land, services, so on. 900,000 buildings. 77,000 of them are either underutilized or unutilized. Run it like a business. Trump can do that. Okay? We can get that money back. A lot of our businesses, a lot of our American-based businesses have locations around the world, but they can't bring that money back here to the United States shores because our corporate rate is the highest in the world. So they keep it out. Well, that 2.1 trillion could be repatriated with a 6-month holiday on tax, with a stipulation that they would use 10% of that to create jobs for the unemployed, underemployed, and those that are on welfare. Then they've got their dignity back, and they're paying into the pot, not taking out of the pot. Helps them understand that with a Republican candidate, you're going to get a hand up and have a chance at the American dream, and not be getting a hand out just for your vote. So those are some of the things I want you to consider. And you know that saying, if not me, then who? If not now, then when? The ship's about to go off that Niagara Falls. We can't afford to have Hillary in there. We've got to put Trump in, because if we don't, we are in big trouble. Did I mention about the 25 to 35 million registered voters? 30 evangelicals. Last presidential election, did not vote. Because I don't really like that one, I don't like that one, so I'm not going to vote at all. But not voting is in effect a vote for the wrong person. At least you can put the person in there that you can work with. Trump is a person you can work with. Ben has set up meetings with him with top evangelical leaders around the country. We had a summit in New York City, and he talks with religious leaders every week. Ben talks with them several times a week and sometimes several times a day. He's listening. He's someone that wants to work with all of us. Work with all of us so that we can still be a country that's of, by, and for the people, and not of, by, and for the government. So please, within your spheres of influence, help those people to understand that they need to get out there too within their spheres of influence, because this is it. If we don't take care of this now, then with their Supreme Court picks and with kicking this can down the road, there's not that much road left. This is it. There won't be any country left for our grandchildren and their grandchildren. Please spread the word, because our media is not doing it. Ben, because he's not in the political arena anymore, they're listening. So I don't know if you noticed, but he's on a lot of different stations. And so that's why he sees himself as a Joseph, and I do too. Because if you can have the ear, and you can help to encourage and, let's get the right things done in the best order possible, because there's a lot of prioritizing too, but there's a lot that needs to be done, and we only have one candidate. So please, within your spheres of influence, thank you.